because you were in, I say, one of the most perfect 10 horror movies of all time. And I'm kind of curious because, I've always heard the stories how fast you guys had to shoot. I think it was like 30 days or something. There he is. The guy that spit in Otis Riffwood's face.
I've got a great story about that.
Didn't work out too well for you when you did that, but
Lauren, we're 20 years. We're 20 years reunion this year. I was just out with Bill Moseley, William Forsythe, and Michael Berryman. We were doing a thing in Detroit, as a matter of fact. And so, interestingly, we're verily getting together with little subgroups and going out and doing the conventions a little bit, meeting fans. But
I saw you. I think it was you four are doing something else somewhere not too far from me. I like I stayed over, but maybe that was it. I don't know if it just happened, but
I think there was a thing in Maryland, for instance.
That was it. That's it, Maryland.
Yeah, so I couldn't go, but I replaced myself with Tyler Main, who a lot of people don't know that he actually was in The Devil's Rejects. It's one of my favorite scenes. It's the poetic shootout, the entry of the opening of the movie, where he's trying to hold off the law, and it's all in slow motion, and it's got this great Allman Brothers music over the montage, and it's really
it's the very first scene where Sheriff Lydell pulls up to the house and says, "We got you." Yeah, that's that.
Yeah, and it's great. So that's Tyler Main, who replaced Robert Mukes. That's correct. So, and then of course Rob gets to know Tyler well on that shoot and recognizes this is my Michael Myers when I go about doing that. And so I called Michael Myers, i.e. Tyler, and I said, I can't make this little gig, but would you go? The thing about The Devil's Rejects, and I really can't, it's hard. You'll appreciate it, but it was lightning in a bottle. It really was. And I give the specific credit to at least four guys. One, of course, was Sid Haig, God rest his soul. Obviously, Bill Moseley, William Forsythe, who I referenced, and Ken Foray. These were really old pros in the genre. So not just old pros who were actors, and they are, but in that genre, I think like a Lugosi, I think like a Christopher, Plummer. I think they had a special skill set that is hard to identify. What I determined what it was, because I'd never done a horror film prior to The Devil's Rejects, but I was watching, and they would ever so slightly just lean into the camera you were also in camera, and so it would invade your personal space, and you could feel the tension, and it just was something that they could rock from their heel to their toe and make it different. They could affect a scene, and it was amazing. And they brought
that's veterans just know, like they see the shot, they know what they could do.
I feel like we don't get that in our, and no offense, because look at their background, but we might not get that in our Terrifiers. We might not get that in our Smiles. And speaking of horror genre, I do classify it in these two camps right now. Terrifier being blood-soaked,
gore porn.
A little campy, and then maybe more psychological tear for the Smile franchise. And I think you lean one way or the other, but The Devil's Reject certainly was its own thing. And we knew at the table read, it was really bizarre because typically you just sit there and go through it, kind of go through the beats. But, when Sid Haig, the first line came out of his mouth, we all just sort of got rigid and like, oh shit, this is on, and it's real, and it never stopped from there. And
it's so different, and I love how when he did the House of 1,000 Corpses, you could tell he was tributing a lot of things from the past, and I just think like it's cool he introduced a bunch of new characters, but you could see his influence. And it's his first film, so maybe not try to go for it. So as soon as I saw the trailer for this, I'm like, that don't even look like the same movie.
Yeah,
And
I think that's.
And I loved it because it's like, but the second the Midnight Riders song kicked in, I looked at my friend while I was sitting there, like, I think this is going to be something we're going to forever remember. Like, we felt it right there. Like, this is not that last film. I'm not knocking the last film. I'm just saying,
yeah,
because the fact they took it over here and he knows the characters and just, I was like, I think this is going to be something so wicked. And like, every horror movie fan was going crazy for that entire month, being like, wow, like, new.
It was it was special for sure. I always think of Thousand Corpses as its own thing. Maybe his film school, maybe it wasn't quite as polished, maybe it wasn't quite the thing about Devil's Rejects that I always feel like every character has at least a little mini arc. There's a life that you see and you kind of attach to. Uh, um, you know, even the guy that sells the Rhode Island Reds, you know, and everybody has a life that you can attach to, just enough dark humor to relieve a little tension when it's heightened, for sure. You know, look at that jacket. I don't want to know about that fucking jacket, you know. So it was special, and I think Rob was masterful at just keeping the reins held tightly but also loosely. And so it's like, for instance, with my character Adam Banjo, a lot of that of course isn't on the page, and the idea that I wanted him to be bravado and until the shit hits the fan, and then put on his wife's skirt, you know, until he has to muster up the courage to fight the monster and die in a fiery crash, um, screaming out his, you know, his buddy's name, you know, so that it was memorable. And I think all the characters had these kinds of lives, or scenes that Rob allowed to be built and grow. And so he was really, he was very available for that, and he had an expectation for us to kind of bring. He's like, look, I'm providing the chips, but you guys bring the dip, all right? And we did.
I remember Bill Moseley. I go to conventions all the time, so you know there was always the Q&As. Him and Sid used to do them like all the time together. But he said like the first film, he just read the script, like whatever Rob put on that script, I'm reading it, and that's it. But he said Devil's Rejects, like now that he had the character down, he worked with Rob before, as you were just saying, it was like, all right, we're going to do that, but we're going to also, you know, I think it's like he gave you a little bit, like the whole house, I guess, a little bit more creative of like, if you feel something, do it. Is that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about Rob, is that he does write the script, but it's a blueprint. So, you know, it's definitely not, it's just the framework of what he's wanting to get done. And he hires um his ensemble cast to sort of to do the work. There's a lot of times I'll go to him and he'll be like, "Man, that's why I hired you. I wrote it, but that doesn't mean it's that good. It's only good when you make it better. So please figure that out. I'll try to help you." Like Rob and I have this interesting shorthand, and it starts actually with music. And I'll be. It started in Devil's Rejects with Adam Banjo. What kind of music does Adam listen to? You know, and I'll put 4 or 5 songs down, which for Adam, for me, was Creedence Clearwater, and Rob was very amenable to that. And so he'll respond with a certain, you know, chicken fingers types of sounds, um, you know, where that might be Roy Clark or Buck Owens, you know, that kind of stuff. And then as we do other characters, for instance, in the movie 31, when I kind of was a little lost with my guy Psycho Head as to his soundtrack, because I know Rob is pop centric, believe it or not. I was like, well, what do you think? Are we talking like Elton John, Benny and the Jets? He's like, no, 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 way off. I'm thinking uh, Black Betty, Ram Jam. And so when he does that, it tells me as much as I need to know about the character. It's so interesting. Like when you just reference a song, you know exactly who that person is that likes that song and what that says about them. And then you just go from there. So I love that with Rob. And I have complete confidence that I can go, hey, what's the soundtrack of this guy's life, are you thinking? And he likes to be able to say blah 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 blah. And we don't have to go through, well, what,
So
how was he raised or
I
anything.
I got to ask you about one of your fellow cast members of that though, but I know I hear good things about her, but I was always a big fan from back when she was with Jack Tripper. But like Priscilla Barnes doing that scene, like this guy, how was she as a person? And two, like when that scene's happening, I'm just curious how was the room when that was going on?
Well, she's a wonderful person. Obviously, she has had a great career, and she continues to work. Not enough, in my opinion. It would be good to see her more mainstream, even still. I think she had a nice run on this show, Jane the Virgin. Uh, the thing about her level of commitment, she's a student of the craft, and so she never comes at anything with an absolute, this is how I'm going to do it. I know she's really available to to play, and I think that's incredible, because she knows her work, but she doesn't know what someone else is going to bring, and so she can make adjustments on her feet very quickly. I think she's a wonderful actress this way. As that scene goes, I don't think any of us expected. She might have had an inkling as to where it could go. I think, like a great athlete, she saw an opening in the line, and just blew through it and then was off. So I think when she recognized that Otis was going to give her the opportunity to overpower him, she took it and did that. And the tension and the awkward uncomfortableness, if that's a word,
It is
during
yeah.
during that scene was palpable. And so much so that I could tell Mosley was, not Otis, but Bill Mosley was really not comfortable with how this was going, which I get, because he had no expectation that he was going to be sexually assaulted, so to speak, or overwhelmed by this actor, and that she was not going to dial it back at all. And she understood that Rob was okay with that. It was a safe space, and it was it was overwhelming. And I don't think anybody uh, could believe, after that first take, what she had done. And then Rob's like, we could push it even further, and most of us were like, how? And
Yeah,
and Priscilla did. And so that scene is epic, and she doesn't get enough credit for uh and and then, when you do that, the intensity so high, which is typical of Rob, and you've seen him in concert, so the intensity that he has as a performer. It's full on. He's entirely committed. Then you have someone like Jeffrey Lewis, who he's not making light of that situation, but he interjects uh, something that is light, but it's perfect because it breaks. We needed the tension broke. Hey, look at that octopus on television. That is crazy. You see that? And so there's just some genius to both. And so she's great. He was great. He was just so Jeffrey Lewis, who of course is Juliette Lewis's father. Or he hands you a business card when you meet him, Lauren, that says Clint Eastwood's best friend.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Love both of those movies. Yep.
yeah, he's delightful. But he was just so tickled by Rob. He was so, all the work he's done in his career, he just thought Rob was so delightful. This crazy guy with dreadlocks, and it's so I don't know that he ever felt like he was making a movie. I felt like he was just having a play date with this child at that time, and so it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot from him. For instance, I'll offer this one story. He said, whenever you're talking to the lead of the movie, always put your hand on his shoulder when you're saying something. That way they can't cut you out.
So let me piggyback off that. He talked about in which way you can, in which way but loose. So he noticed he was getting cut. Anytime the camera, like Clint Eastwood loved the camera on him, where he would just do those dead stares. So he noticed in any which way but loose that Joffrey was cut if he was like kind of standing there. They zoomed in, so he said for the next movie he'd stand closer to him. So in the editing room, like he's in the scene.
Yeah, I mean, he was
Clint caught that at the premiere and is like, "Yeah, I know what you did there."
yeah, he's just a genius of observation, and then his quips or his improv is just, I'm gonna pray to the bunnies, and all the and it made it just gave it the right recipe. It gave it the right spice to, I think, elicit the audience to care for the characters, and everybody kind of had that.